Everyone. In this video I'm going to be talking about joins in SQL. I'll be talking about inner joins, left joins and right joins, right? So basically you'd use a join in SQL when you want to retrieve data from multiple tables, right? And inner join is you are getting data from multiple tables, but it would only display the records that have matching rows in both the tables, right? So let's start off with inner join, right? Let's say we have these two tables, table A and table B, and we would want to display the name and salary from these two tables, right? So we would start off with our select statement, and like I mentioned, we need the name and salary, right, from table A, and we're joining this to table B, right? Table B. And if you want, just to make it easier, you can give aliases. So whenever you'll be referencing this table in future, you can just use the alias name, right? So table A space, I'm just going to call it A, and table B space, I'm going to call it C, or B rather. And I can reference the table names in each of my columns that I would be using, right? So my name comes from table B, and I have given alias as B, so I can just use B dot name. And likewise, salary comes from table A, and that is A, so I'll just give A dot salary, right? So we're asking for name from table B and salary from table A, right? And we have written our join, and like I mentioned earlier, inner join would retrieve matching rows from multiple tables, right? So we need something to compare against. uh, so if we just look at table A and table B, so what can we basically compare against? We cannot compare age or salary because we don't have those corresponding columns in table B, right? So only thing we can compare these two tables by is the ID, because we can compare ID1 against ID1 likewise, right? So the syntax would be on a dot id is equal to b dot id, right? And that completes our join, right? So if you want to look at the output, how is that going to work, right? So this is small table, so we can just manually compare, right? So if you look at this table, it has got 1 2 3 4 5, and even this table has 1 2 3 4 5. So when the SQL would be comparing these two tables, so it compares one and finds there's one in table B, so it would retrieve the results for that row, right? So your first record would be Peterson, Peterson 5000, Flintoff 2000, and likewise you get the name and salary for all the five guys, right? So this was pretty straightforward, right? Now let's look at table B and table C, right? uh, let's say we want to display the name and order ID from these two tables, right? So we'll start off with our select statement. Select name comma order ID from table B, and I would call it as B, and I would join it with table C, and I'd call that as C, and I would just reference all my column names. So name comes from B and order ID comes from C, right? And like we now know that we need to compare the matching, similar columns in the two tables, right? And even in this case, we're going to compare it by IDs, right? So that would be b dot id is equal to c dot id, right? And that would complete our join statement. Now let's quickly see how our output's going to look like, right? Because in our earlier case we had corresponding matching rows in both the tables, right, for all the records. So you would expect to see all five results, right, or all five rows. But in this case, let's look at them one by one, right? So first we are comparing ID1 against ID1, right? So there's a matching row. So our first record would be Peterson, and his order ID is 100, right? Now second one is ID2, and there's a matching row for that, right? So our second record would be Flintoff, and his order ID is 200. Now if you see, there are two rows for ID number 2, right? So there would be two records created for that. So next would be Flintoff again, and this order ID is 300, right? Now next one is ID number 3, right? So when it tries to find ID number 3, it does not find it, so it's gonna skip that. So we are not going to see anything for Harmison in our result, right? So likewise, Hoggard is not there, so that would be skipped as well. And for Bell, there are three records, so it would be displayed three times, 2, 3, and your results would be 400, 500, and 600 respectively. Alright, so that is the output that we would expect to get, right? I hope this makes sense. And let's say in the same scenario, right? Let's say if somebody wants to display the names of all the people regardless of whether they have an order or not, right? So in that case we can use something called a left join, right? So syntax, everything pretty much remains the same, so you just add left in front of your join. So what that basically does is it's gonna display everything from your left table, right? Because we have written table B first and table C, right? So it basically considers table B as the left table and table C as the right table, right? So when you write a left join, it basically displays everything from the left table and just the matching rows from the right table. So let's see how our output would change in this case, right? uh, because we have already covered all the matching rows, right? Because 1, 2, and 4 have already been covered, so let's just focus on the remaining ones, right? So we have ID number 3 and ID number 5, which do not have an order, right? But they would still be displayed because we're using a left join, right? So this would be Harmison and Hoggard, and since they don't have any orders, it would just be displayed as null. Right? Yeah. And a right outer join is just the opposite, right? Your syntax would just be right, and it would just basically do the opposite. So it would just display everything from your right table, right? And it would just display the matching rows from the left table. So it's just the opposite of left join, right? That's all I wanted to cover in this video. Hope you got a good idea on what or how to use joins in SQL. If you have any questions or comments, please do leave them and I will be happy to answer them. Thank you.